Hi, my name is Scott Harrigan. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees, and I'm here to announce our annual congregational meeting, which will be held on June 13th at 12 p.m. We will be holding a hybrid church meeting, meaning we will be doing it both in person and on Zoom. If you are fully vaccinated, you can come to the UUCA in the chapel. Proof of vaccination would be gratefully accepted. Although masking is not required for vaccinated people, if you would prefer to mask, we will leave that to your discretion. We will do our best to create a space between members, and the overflow will go into the Emerson room via Zoom. Or you can attend the meeting from the comfort of your home on Zoom. A link will be provided for the live feed. RSVP to the email on your screen now. It is important to RSVP if you plan to come to the live annual meeting or attend by Zoom, so we can have the membership list prepared so we can take attendance for voting. In-person voting, you'll be issued a voting card. Zoom voting, we will do a poll with raised hands. What will be covered and voted on in the congregational meeting is 1, the annual church budget, 2, the nominating committee's recommendations for the board, which are Bruce Becker and Linda Gardner, and the nominating and leadership committee nominees, which is Kim Diana Connolly and Virginia Snyder, and the trustee for the endowment trust, John Thompson. There will also be a vote on the language change request from the endowment trust regarding Article 11 of the Declaration. It will be changed from the fiscal year of the trust shall coincide with the fiscal year of the church to the fiscal year of the trust will be the calendar year. Thank you, and hope to see you at the meeting.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Amherst. I'm Reverend the minister of this congregation. At the beginning of each service, we offer words of acknowledgement and gratitude for the land upon which our church rests. The campus of UU Amherst was once occupied by the Seneca Nation, one of the tribes that make up the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Today we acknowledge the relationship they cultivated and nourished with this land. We are the grateful heirs of this deep connection. We ask forgiveness on behalf of our ancestors and ourselves, and we covenant to live with respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. We give away our gratitude for the beauty and resiliency of this lovely planet that birthed us, nourishes and sustains us, and that will receive us back when life has used us up. We begin our worship together by lighting the flaming chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, that embodies the light of reason and the search for truth and meaning, the warmth of friendship and community, and the fire of our commitment to bring more justice and compassion to a hurting world. If you have a chalice or a simple candle at home, please prepare to light it as we light our shared chalice. May the light of this chalice give light and warmth to our community when we are joyful and when we despair. And may we feel the warmth spread from our circle to wider and wider circles until all know they belong to the one circle of life. Welcome to this Pride Sunday service. Here in Buffalo, the local Pride festivities will once again be virtual due to COVID. As we celebrate yet another Pride Sunday in isolation and restriction, I wonder how that reality can make us even more compassionate and proactive allies in the LGBTQ+ community, and more welcoming and relevant to those in our congregation who may identify as queer or questioning. I think it's safe to say that most Unitarian Universalist churches, at least those that are large enough to have religious professionals on staff, offer a special service at the beginning of June to lift up and celebrate Pride Month. In a faith tradition that affirms and promotes the inherent worth and dignity of each person and recognizes that we are all part of an interdependent web, it is important to be explicit about just how wide our circle of inclusion is meant to be. As I was preparing for this worship service, I decided to include a bit of Unitarian Universalist history with regard to the LGBTQ+ community. I suppose I could have gone to the UUA website and done a bit of a search, but it occurred to me that were I not a Unitarian Universalist, and I wanted to know more about this faith in relation to LGBTQ issues and people, that I wouldn't even know to look there. In that situation, my first impulse would be to do a Google search and then see what a Wikipedia had to say. So that's what I did. I think it's important to know what the most readily accessible information is, particularly when it concerns this faith tradition to which I have dedicated my life. I found it interesting that Wikipedia tagged the article as having issues because it relied too heavily on primary sources. Isn't that a good thing? Anyway, I was pleased to find a concise accounting of our faith's track record, although it focuses more on ministers than on congregants. Our congregations have always been safe havens for gay people. It just took a little longer for those representing the institution to be fully acknowledged. We do have the distinction of ordaining the first openly gay minister. Here's the excerpt from Wikipedia. The first ordained minister of a major religious group in the U.S. or Canada to come out as gay was UU minister James Stoll in 1969. There have been several UUA resolutions supporting people regardless of sexual orientation since 1970. Unitarian Universalism was the first denomination to accept openly transgender people as full members with eligibility to become clergy. In 1988, the first openly transgender person was ordained by the Unitarian Universalist Association. The UUA has had a popular program for a church wanting to become a welcoming congregation for LGBT people since 1989. UUA has officially supported UUA clergy performing services of union between same-sex couples since 1984, and has supported same-sex marriage since 1996. In 2002, Sean Dennison became the first openly transgender person in the Unitarian Universalist ministry called to serve a congregation. He was called to South Valley UU Society, Salt Lake City, Utah. In 2004, UU minister Reverend Deborah Hafner of the Religious Institute on Sexual Morality, Justice, and Healing published an open letter to religious leaders on marriage equality to affirm same-sex marriage from a multi-faith perspective. Our congregation is one of the many who have done the work to become certified welcoming congregations. The work was accomplished long before I arrived here, and we are considering the possibility of recertifying in the future. We continue to include LGBTQ+ issues in our justice work, always striving for knowledge and compassion. Being a truly welcoming congregation is never done and dusted. It's important to continue to grow and widen the circle of inclusion. We do this not simply to live our first principle of inherent worth and dignity in the abstract, but because of the people in our lives, those in this congregation and in our circles of friends and family. We know that Unitarian Universalism and the love, affirmation, and advocacy that we represent saves lives. The love and acceptance that we embody literally saves the lives of questioning children, bullied teens, and hopeless adults. The message of our faith affirms that all are born blessed and worthy. Full stop. We see you. We love you. We will be the people to whom you can turn for support and who will challenge and nurture you into the awesome human you can become. A reading by Reverend Teresa Soto. We hold hope close. In this community, we hold hope close. We don't always know what comes next, but that cannot dissuade us. We don't always know just what to do, but that will not mean that we are lost in the wilderness. We rely on the certainty beneath, the foundation of our values and ethics. We are the people who return to love like a north star and to the truth that we are greater together than we are alone. Our hope does not live in some glimmer of an indistinct future. Rather, we know the way to the world of which we dream, and by covenant and the movement forward of one right action and the next, we know that one day we will arrive at home.
The Bear That Wasn't by Frank Tashlin. Once upon a time, in fact, it was on a Tuesday, the bear stood at the edge of a great forest and gazed up at the sky. Away up high, he saw a flock of geese flying south. Then he gazed up at the trees of the forest. The leaves had turned all yellow and brown and were falling from the branches. He knew that when the geese flew south and the leaves fell from the trees, that winter would soon be here and snow would cover the forest. It was time to go into a cave and hibernate. And that was just what he did. Not long afterward, in fact, it was on a Wednesday, men came, lots of men, with charts and maps and surveying instruments. They charted and mapped and surveyed all over the place. Then more men came, lots of men with steam shovels and saws and tractors and axes. They steam shoveled and sawed and tractored and axed all over the place. They worked and worked and worked, and finally they built a great big huge factory right over the top of the sleeping bear's cave. The factory operated all through the cold winter. And then it was spring again. Deep down under one of the factory buildings, the bear awoke. He blinked his eyes and yawned. Then he stood up sleepily and looked around. It was very dark. He could hardly see. Then he saw a light in the distance. "Oh, there's the entrance to the cave," he said, and yawned again. He walked up the stairs to the entrance and stepped out into the bright spring sunshine. His eyes were only half opened as he was still very sleepy. His eyes didn't stay half opened long. They suddenly popped wide apart. He looked straight ahead. Where was the forest? Where was the grass? Where were the trees? Where were the flowers? What had happened? Where was he? Things looked so strange. He didn't know where he was. But we do, don't we? We know that he was right in the middle of the busy factory. "I must be dreaming," he said. "Of course, that's it. I'm dreaming." So he closed his eyes and pinched himself. Then he opened his eyes very slowly and looked about. The big buildings were still there. It wasn't a dream. It was real. Just then, a man came out of a door. "Hey, you get back to work," the man said. "I'm the foreman, and I'll report you for not working." The bear said, "I don't work here. I'm a bear." The foreman laughed very loud. "Ha ha 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 ha! That's a fine excuse for a man to keep from doing any work. Saying he's a bear." The bear said, "But I am a bear." The foreman stopped laughing. He was very mad. "Don't try to fool me," he said. "You're not a bear. You're a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. I'm going to take you to the general manager." The bear said, "No, you're mistaken. I am a bear." The general manager was very mad too. He said, "You're not a bear. You're a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. I'm going to take you to the third vice president." The bear said, "I'm sorry to hear you say that. You see, I'm a bear." The third vice president was even madder. He got up out of his chair and said, "You're not a bear. You're a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. I'm going to take you to the second vice president." The bear leaned over his desk and said, "But that isn't true. I am a bear, just a plain, ordinary, everyday bear." The second vice president was more than mad or madder. He was furious. He pointed his finger at the bear and said, "You're not a bear. You're a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. I'm going to take you to the first vice president. Who? Me? The bear asked. How can you say that when I am a bear? The first vice president yelled in rage. He said, You're not a bear. You're a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. I'm going to take you to the president. The bear pleaded, This is a dreadful error, because ever since I can remember, I've always been a bear. Listen, the bear told the president, I don't work here. I'm a bear, and please don't say I'm a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat, because the first vice president and the second vice president and the first vice president and the general manager and the foreman have told me that already. Thank you for telling me, the president said. I won't say it, but that's just what I think you are. The bear said, I'm a bear. The president smiled and said, You can't be a bear. Bears are only in a zoo or a circus. They're never inside a factory, and that's where you are, inside a factory. So how can you be a bear? The bear said, But I am a bear. The president said, Not only are you a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat, but you are also very stubborn. So I'm going to prove it to you once and for all that you are not a bear. The bear said, But I am a bear. And so they all got into the president's car and drove to the zoo. Is he a bear? The president asked the zoo bears. The zoo bears said, No, he isn't a bear, because if he were a bear, he wouldn't be outside the cage with you. He would be inside the cage with us. The bear said, But I am a bear. A little baby zoo bear said, I know what he is. He's a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. All the zoo bears laughed. The bear said, But I am a bear. And so they all left the zoo and drove 600 miles away to the nearest circus. Is he a bear? The president asked the circus bears. The circus bears said, No, he isn't a bear, because if he were a bear, he wouldn't be sitting in a grandstand seat with you. He would be wearing a little hat with a striped ribbon on it, holding on to a balloon and riding a bicycle with us. The bear said, But I am a bear. One little baby circus bear said, I know what he is. He's a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. All the circus bears almost fell off their bicycles laughing. The bear said, But I am a bear. They left the circus and drove back to the factory. And so they put the bear to work on a big machine with a lot of other men. The bear worked on the big machine for many, many months. One day, a long time afterward, the factory closed down and all the workers left and went home. The bear walked along far behind them. He was all alone and had no place to go. As he walked along, he happened to gaze up at the sky. Away up high, he saw a flock of geese flying south. Then the bear gazed up at the trees. The leaves had turned all yellow and brown and were falling from the branches. The bear knew when the geese flew south and the leaves fell from the trees that winter would soon be here and snow would cover the forest. It was time to go into a cave and hibernate. So he walked over to a huge tree that had a cave hollowed out beneath its roots. He was just about to go into it when he stopped and said, But I can't go into a cave and hibernate. I'm not a bear. I'm a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. So winter came, the snow fell. It covered the forest and it covered him. He sat there shivering with cold and he said, But I sure wish I was a bear. The longer he sat there, the colder he became. His toes were freezing, his ears were freezing, and his teeth were chattering. Icicles covered his nose and chin. He had been told so often that he was a silly man who needed a shave and wore a fur coat that he felt it must be true. So he just sat there because he didn't know what a silly man who needed a shave and wore a fur coat would do if he were freezing to death in the snow. The poor bear was very lonely and very sad. He didn't know what to think. Then suddenly he got up and walked through the deep snow toward the cave. Inside it was cozy and snug. The, the icy wind and cold, cold snow couldn't reach him here. He felt warm all over. He sank down on a bed of pine boughs, and soon he was happily asleep and dreaming sweet dreams, just like all bears do when they hibernate. So even though the foreman and the general manager and the third vice president and the second vice president and the first vice president and the president and the zoo bears and the circus bears had said that he was a silly man who needed a shave and wore a fur coat, I don't think he really believed it, do you? No, indeed, he knew he wasn't a silly man, and he wasn't a silly bear either.
Oh my, poor bear. Everyone tried to tell him he was something other than what he knew he was. It was almost his undoing, until he let go of all of the things that those supposedly wise people and bears had told him and listened to that deep inner voice, the one that unfailingly let him know when it was time to find a cave to sleep away the winter and to emerge again as the earth began to thaw with the spring. That inner knowing that he had come to trust. I think this little story can be instructive as we continue our conversation today. As we dive into the heart of our reflection time today, I want to bring Reverend Teresa Soto's words that we heard earlier into our shared space. In addition to celebrating the many gifts of the LGBTQ+ community, we are going to do some heavy lifting, and I need you to understand why we undertake the challenge to try harder, to realize that the impact of our words and actions holds more weight than our good intentions, and to lovingly hold ourselves and others accountable. If you know me at all, you know that I value the clear articulation of our why before we move to what and how. Why is it important to be good allies to the LGBTQ+ community? Why is it crucial that we keep the circle of inclusion as wide as possible and welcome individuals and families in all of their glorious diversity? Why do we take responsibility for our language, being mindful of the potential for harm? Because, in the words of Reverend Soto, in this community, we hold hope close. We don't always know what comes next, but that cannot dissuade us. We don't always know just what to do, but that will not mean that we are lost in the wilderness. We rely on the certainty beneath, the foundation of our values and ethics. We are the people who return to love like a north star and to the truth that we are greater together than we are alone. Our hope does not live in some glimmer of an indistinct future. Rather, we know the way to the world of which we dream, and by covenant and the movement forward of one right action and the next, we know that one day we will arrive at home. We are the people who return to love like a north star and to the truth that we are greater together than we are alone. That's who we are. Our why can be reduced to the simple fact that we are the love people. We keep our doors and minds and hearts open. Let's return to our story for a moment. I note that this story was written in 1946, and its sexist language makes it feel a bit dated to our ears today. That's good. That's progress. If something that used to be simply assumed feels a bit yucky, well, it's a sign that we are evolving and changing our expectations. That poor bear. Everybody was sure they knew what they were seeing, and nobody was willing to listen to what the bear knew was Key's reality. Oh, did you notice what I just did there? If you were tuned into the service a couple weeks ago, you heard our Director of Faith Development, Angela, reflect on new pronouns for elements of the living world that do not fit in the traditional pronouns of he, she, or it. She shared with us the pronouns suggested by botanist and author Robin Wall Kimmerer: key for the singular and kin for the plural. So tree is not an it. A tree is a key. Our bear, although described with masculine pronouns in the story, more likely falls under key. There are two lessons here. Individuals can name themselves based on their inner truth, and pronouns matter. Those are actually not separate lessons, as they are related to identity, representation, and challenging heteronormative assumptions. I told you we were in for some heavy lifting. Since we've dipped our cup into pronouns, let's begin there. If you've been on Zoom calls with me or have received emails from me, you'll have noticed that after my name, I have listed my pronouns: she, her. You might be thinking, well, of course your pronouns are she, her. You're a female. And in my case, you would be correct. But not everyone who happens to look like a thing is actually that thing. A bear might look like a silly man in a fur coat that needs a shave, but the bear is still a bear. In our culture, it has been the norm that if someone looks like a thing, they must be that thing. Persons who appear masculine must be male, and those who appear feminine must be female, and with the expected pronouns, of course. Of course? What about those who appear as one thing but don't feel like that inside? It's not their inner reality. What about those for whom gender identity is an unnecessary binary distinction that just doesn't make sense or fit their reality? Identity matters. Representation matters. Pronouns matter. I include my pronouns after my name, partly to let folks know how to refer to me, and partly to normalize the practice for folks who may feel uncomfortable about asserting their pronouns, the language that best describes them, to others. We also help to normalize the choice to name oneself by asking what pronouns we should use. One of my colleagues has requested that pronouns not be used. Nothing really seems to fit. So we refer to that colleague by that colleague's name. You affirm someone's personhood when you ask how they would like to be addressed. As the love people, that's something we do, or at least are learning to do. Let's talk for a moment about heteronormative culture. That's quite a mouthful to say, and it can use a little unpacking. We can split the word into two elements to better understand what it means. Hetero refers to heterosexual, attracted to someone of the opposite sex. And normative is what our culture tells us is normal, which by definition means that any other expressions are aberrant. Now let's add another layer to that assumption: cisgender heteronormative. Cisgender denotes a person whose sense of personal identity or gender corresponds with their birth sex. Based on the characteristics viewable at the moment of birth, I am a female. My sense of identity is congruent with that, so I am a cisgender female. If you're thinking, why do we need an extra word for this? You look like a female, you feel like a female, you're a female. Well, hang on a moment. Here's where the cultural normalization comes into play. Without words to describe a cis identity, we automatically make that the norm, and everything else is an aberration. By adding this category, we help to legitimize other identities. All are possible. There are multiple hues in the rainbow. They are all legitimate. There are multiple hues to human skin tones. They are all legitimate. There are multiple ways of understanding oneself. They are all legitimate. Does this feel all new and hard? That's okay. It's been hard for non-binary folks forever. It's okay if it's a little hard for those of us who have not had to do the work that was so hard in the past. The same process is in play when it comes to a heteronormative experience. Heterosexuality is held up as the norm, while everything else is seen as other, rather than being seen as simply part of a spectrum of affection and attraction. You're probably wishing for a musical interlude about now, but it's important that we continue this hard work. Let's take on what I like to call identity alphabet soup. As Unitarian Universalists, we should be awesome at this. We are UUs. Our national association is the UUA. Religious education is RE, and faith development is FD. UU ministers belong to the UUMA, and religious educators belong to LREDA, or Loreda. Newcomers to our congregations are baffled by our casual use of random letters of the alphabet to direct folks. We are so handy with our own alphabet soup, we can certainly stretch ourselves to understand and use the proper letters that the queer community uses to identify and express themselves. Let me acknowledge that I have twice used the phrase queer community. I do that mindfully and with respect to my friends and colleagues. As someone who does not identify as queer, I take it very seriously when I use the language of any community of which I am not a part. Be mindful. Be respectful. Members of a community can speak with much more freedom in this regard. I will tell you that I had to reach out to a friend who does identify as queer to be sure I had my facts right. I usually use the letters LGBTQIA to describe the queer community. But I recently saw new letters that I was not familiar with. I'm grateful for the education. So let's start with the basics. LGBT stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. I think the first three are probably well understood, and transgender is when the birth sex assignment does not align with inner reality. Q stands for queer and questioning. I stands for intersex, or what used to be referred to as hermaphrodite, with both male and female genitalia visible at birth, which is actually more common than you might think. And A stands for asexual, having no attraction for anyone of any sex. LGBTQIA is actually shorthand for LGBTQQIAA, which is why there's often a plus sign after the A in LGBTQIA. However, this week I saw for the first time LGBTQ and then the number 2 and the letter S, which is why I called on my friend to help me understand. The 2S stands for two-spirited, which is frequently used in indigenous communities to describe someone who identifies as having both a masculine and feminine spirit. If this feels like a moving target, let me reiterate that language is always evolving and changing, and self-identity and representation matter. If you are not part of the queer community, it really doesn't matter if you find the changing letters cumbersome. It's not your identity. Your job is to be respectful with an open mind and an open heart. We are the love people. It's what we do. We are the faith tradition that is welcoming and affirming. Ours is the religion that makes the bold claim that each of us was born awesome the first time. The spark of divinity shines in each of us, whether that includes the prisms of the rainbow or not. Our loving is the miracle.
How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
Another reading from Reverend Teresa Soto. Dear trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and gender-expansive friends and kin, and those of us whose gender is survival, you are not hard to love and respect. Your experience is a blessing. Your pronouns are not a burden or a trial. They are part of your name, just shorter. Some of our kin use only their names where pronouns would be, the names they are called. Remember that someone getting them wrong is not a poor reflection on you. It is not your fault. Your body really and truly belongs to you, no one else. The stories of your body, the names of your body's parts, your body's privacy, the sum of your body's glory. It is not okay for anyone to press their story of you back to the beginning of our liberation. We will find the people ready to be on the freedom for the people way. We will go on. No one can rename you other. It can't stick. As you offer the gift of being and saying who you are. Mostly, though, your stories belong to you. Your joy and complexity are beautiful, however you may choose to tell it or not tell it. Some folks, cis, may take their liberty for an unholy license. You are beloved. Please keep to our shared tasks of healing, getting free. Our ongoing task is to live into the potential of our liberating faith, to become the love people, the church of the open doors, open minds, and open hearts, to change the world by living principled lives. As demonstrated in the first portion of this service, we do this by educating ourselves, by loving and affirming individuals, and doing our best to create a welcoming community where all can grow and flourish. That is all good work, and we undertake it mindfully. But sometimes we just wish we could do something, some meaningful act that would extend our principles into the world to have a greater impact. I'm happy to tell you that there are things you can do to make the world better and safer for LGBTQ folk and their beloveds. Sometimes action means showing up at rallies and demonstrations for justice issues related to the LGBTQ community. Other times it might mean volunteering at a shelter, taking someone into your home, or writing a check to an organization that is doing this work. Depending on your situation, these actions may or may not be possible for you. But never fear, there is something meaningful and effective that you can do, regardless of mobility or resources. Let me set the stage. As you are surely aware, the previous presidential administration stoked the fires of hatred and intolerance, further polarizing a country that has become increasingly divided over the last 4 decades. Although a new administration has been established, the policies, appointments, and rhetoric trundle on, gathering momentum through closed Planned Parenthood clinics, voter suppression laws, and renewed attempts to remove rights and protections from LGBTQ+ individuals and families. Without federal protections, states are one by one tightening the noose of anti-LGBTQ legislation, a process that many of us have looked upon with horror, but with a sick feeling of powerlessness. It's true. We may be powerless in our tiny numbers to stop that train of misery, but we can lift up and support those individuals, groups, and businesses who are supporting LGBTQ+ rights. The capitalist system may have reduced us from citizens to consumers, but we can use the power inherent in the latter to make a significant difference. Consumers can increase a business's success through good reviews or word-of-mouth endorsement. Or we can use that same power to boycott businesses for their bad practices and encourage others to do the same. I suggest that we lift up and offer encouragement to the businesses that have taken a stand against anti-LGBTQ legislation. I'm going to list for you in alphabetical order the businesses that took just such a public stand in March of this year. That list can be found on the website Freedom for All Americans, a bipartisan campaign to secure full non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ people nationwide. Their work brings together Republicans and Democrats, businesses large and small, people of faith, and allies from all walks of life to make the case for comprehensive non-discrimination protections that ensure everyone is treated fairly and equally. The Human Rights Campaign is America's largest civil rights organization working to achieve equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people. HRC envisions a world where LGBTQ people are embraced as full members of society, at home, at work, and in every community. You may have noticed that the list of businesses that have taken a public stance for LGBTQ rights and protections are overwhelmingly in the moment. 2 years ago, how many of us had even heard of Instacart? Many of us could not have navigated the pandemic isolation without that form of contact-free shopping for groceries and other essentials. Apple, HP, Microsoft, if you have a computer, there's a very good chance you have one of those. AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, if you have a cell phone, there's a very good chance you do business with one of these companies. And of course, Amazon has become a mainstay for many of us. These businesses may have other complicating factors, but pressing for the rights of LGBTQ folk is not one of them. We know how powerful it can be to vote with our dollars by supporting businesses that uphold our values and avoiding or even boycotting those that do not. I have no intention of eating from a certain fast food chicken joint, no matter how good their lemonade is or how heartwarming their commercials. It matters what we do. It matters that we not only embrace our values, but that we live them into the world. It is the explicit mission of this congregation to challenge ourselves and the community to foster more justice and compassion in the world. Today I've given you several ways to do this. Understanding gender identity and sexual orientation. Respecting and using appropriate pronouns, and by appropriate, I mean the chosen pronouns of the person, not what your third grade teacher told you is proper English usage. And educating ourselves and others to open hearts and minds to affirm the LGBTQIA2S community and their right to exist and express themselves fully, with all of the rights and privileges that the Constitution promises the citizens of the United States. And we can do something tangible by supporting the businesses that have taken a stand against anti-LGBTQ legislation, by leveraging our power as consumers and encouraging them with letters, emails, and phone calls. I will send the list out through our all-church email listserv, and if you need postcards and postage, just let me know, and I'll be happy to provide them. We are not powerless. We are not just supporters and allies in hopelessness. We are the love people, and we are a force to be reckoned with. We can make a difference. As Reverend Teresa Soto said, in this community, we hold hope close. We don't always know what comes next, but that cannot dissuade us. We don't always know just what to do, but that will not mean that we are lost in the wilderness. We rely on the certainty beneath, the foundation of our values and ethics. We are the people who return to love like a north star and to the truth that we are greater together than we are alone. Our hope does not live in some glimmer of an indistinct future. Rather, we know the way to the world of which we dream, and by covenant and the movement forward of one right action and the next, we know that one day we will arrive at home.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If
We close this time of worship as we extinguish our chalice with these familiar words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us, now and always. Thank you for joining us in worship today. Please see the credits at the end of this service for information about the music and other worship elements. And do take a moment to visit our website, uuamherst.org, and click on the giving link, or text your gift to 833-987-1968. Thank you in advance for your generosity.
Travel light and travel easy till I see you once again. Travel light and travel easy, and remember I'm your friend. May the road rise up to greet you as you leave your past behind. I will think about you gently, and I'll hold you in my mind. Travel light and travel easy till I see you once again. Travel light and travel easy, and remember I'm your friend.
The businesses that have taken a stand against anti-LGBTQ legislation are AEO Incorporated, Affirm, Airbnb, Altria Group Incorporated, Amalgamated Bank, Amazon, American Airlines, Apple, Asana Incorporated, Atlassian, AT&T, Bayer US LLC, BCW, Ben & Jerry's Homemade Incorporated, Biogen, Boehringer Ingelheim USA, Capital One, Cargill, Celanese, Center for Community Self-Help, Chobani, Corning Incorporated, CSAA Insurance Group, Dell Technologies, Dow Incorporated, Dropbox Incorporated, Eastern Bank, EMD Serono, Millipore Sigma and EMD Electronics, Facebook, Gearbox, GoDaddy, Google, H&M, Hilton, HP Incorporated, IBM Corporation, IHG Hotels and Resorts, IKEA, Instacart, Intuit, Levi Strauss & Company, Lush Fresh Handmade Cosmetics, Lyft Incorporated, Marriott International Incorporated, Mass Mutual, Micron, Microsoft, Mobilize, Molson Coors Beverage Company, Mondelez International, Nike Incorporated, Patreon, PayPal, Peloton, PepsiCo Incorporated, Pfizer, Salesforce, Silicon Labs, Sun Life, Sustainable Food Policy Alliance, including member companies Danone North America, Mars Incorporated, Nestle USA, Synchrony Financial, T-Mobile, TechNet, Thermo Fisher Scientific, Trillium Asset Management, Twitter Incorporated, Uber, Unilever United States, Verizon, Wells Fargo, Zaperi Holding Corporation.
Hi, my name is Scott Harrigan. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees, and I'm here to announce our annual congregational meeting, which will be held on June 13th at 12 p.m. We will be holding a hybrid church meeting, meaning we will be doing it both in person and on Zoom. If you are fully vaccinated, you can come to the UUCA in the chapel. Proof of vaccination would be gratefully accepted. Although masking is not required for vaccinated people, if you would prefer to mask, we will leave that to your discretion. We will do our best to create a space between members, and the overflow will go into the Emerson room via Zoom. Or you can attend the meeting from the comfort of your home on Zoom. A link will be provided for the live feed. RSVP to the email on your screen now. It is important to RSVP if you plan to come to the live annual meeting or attend by Zoom, so we can have the membership list prepared so we can take attendance for voting. In-person voting, you'll be issued a voting card. Zoom voting, we will do a poll with raised hands. What will be covered and voted on in the congregational meeting is 1, the annual church budget, 2, the nominating committee's recommendations for the board, which are Bruce Becker and Linda Gardner, and the nominating and leadership committee nominees, which is Kim Diana Connolly and Virginia Snyder, and the trustee for the endowment trust, John Thompson. There will also be a vote on the language change request from the endowment trust regarding Article 11 of the Declaration. It will be changed from the fiscal year of the trust shall coincide with the fiscal year of the church to the fiscal year of the trust will be the calendar year. Thank you, and hope to see you at the meeting.